When I was in my teens, our city expanded into the countryside, taking over more and more farmland that circled the outskirts of our neighborhoods. There was one farmer who held out for a long time, clinging on to his land. There were a lot of rumors why. Some said it was because the property values just kept going up and he was holding out for top dollar. But others said it was because the farm held a dark secret. He left behind a house and a barn and didn't do much to keep them up. The house went downhill fast. Every time me and my friends would pass by that house, we wondered what was left behind inside. But those rumors about what might have happened at the farm echoed in our heads. Little whispers that he might be behind some missing kids from town. There was never any proof, but that rumor was still out there. Despite this, our curiosity got the best of us, so we decided to check it out. If nothing else, it could be a place where we hung out and maybe did some drinking. There was a well-trafficked road in front of the house, but nothing but a field behind it. So our plan of attack was to enter the house from the back. We came prepared with a crowbar. Once we got inside, we quickly discovered that the old farmer hadn't left much behind, and in fact, we were probably some of the first people inside since he left. The house wasn't trashed, but the place was in bad shape from weather and general neglect. I will say that all the time we were inside the house, there was a low-level creepy vibe pulsing in the air. One of my friends said we should check out the barn. That's where the people said the farmer did his nastiness to those missing kids. Again, those were just rumors, but the mere idea of it creeped me out. But I didn't want my friends to think I was a chicken, so off we went. The barn was a huge building with a red roof and a lot of white peeling paint. I had a deep feeling of unease with each step I took toward it, like a chill seeping into my bones. But the momentum was carrying us toward the barn, and there seemed to be no backing out. Once we got outside the doors, I did not want to go inside. Whatever creepiness factor that was inside the house just went up by a factor of 100. Somehow, I was the one that got elected to go inside. The interior felt like a cave, cold and claustrophobic. There was some old farm equipment inside, plus bales of rotting hay. It seemed so innocent and innocuous, but there was an oppressive sense of malevolence hanging in the air, pressing down on me. Once I made it a few steps into the barn, I thought I heard something, like the sound of a child crying. I was in the lowest level, and the noises were coming from above me on the second story of the barn. I looked up to the ceiling, and I heard footsteps coming toward me from above. They seemed to be walking across the second floor, moving closer and closer to where I stood. They clomped down hard on the wooden floor, getting closer by the second. I decided that it was time to leave. I turned and sprinted out of the barn while my friends asked me what I had seen, but I was too busy running. They say fear can be infectious, and my friends caught my fear. All of us ran from the barn and decided there were better places to be than at this creepy barn. My wife and I were on a mini vacation in a little town called Merrimont, outside Cincinnati, when we had the strangest encounter. Less than a half mile away from our hotel was a famous bell tower called the Carillon Tower. It's located in a small park called the Bell Tower Park. It's a picturesque place with a lovely playground for small children and a wooded area. The tower is made of granite and stands well over 100 feet tall. It's equipped with a set of bells that sound quite beautiful when played. We spent some time exploring the tower, and just as we were leaving, I saw a flash of white out of the corner of my eyes in the woods off to the side of the park. When I looked toward the tree line, I saw a young woman disappear into the trees. When I went in her direction, I discovered a set of steps heading downward to a small flat area. There was a shelter house there, and when I got down to it, I heard singing. At first I thought there were speakers down there, or someone with a boombox. But when I checked it out, I couldn't see any speakers, and there was no one there. The music had this light, ethereal quality and featured the voice of a young woman. The music ended like it was cut off, and then I heard a woman crying, but it came from the direction of the tower. I made my way back up the stairs and back to the tower to make sure no one was in trouble. I circled around the tower, but I didn't see anyone. That's when I heard an ear-piercing scream come from above. It fell down toward me. It was so intense I nearly dropped to my knees. But when I recovered, I didn't see anything or anyone at all. This was such a strange occurrence that I had to find out what the story really was. I did some research and discovered that years ago that the shelter had been used for community concerts. There was a story about a young girl who'd been dating a boy in the choir. He broke up with her. Heartbroken, she climbed to the top of the tower and threw herself off of it. That experience still haunts me to this day, and despite my curiosity, I'm not sure I'll ever visit that tower ever again. Have you ever had that experience that someone was standing behind you, but when you looked, there was no one there? This story happened when Jessie was in middle school. She was just 14 years old, and it was the early 90s. She loved to play computer games, but since it was the 90s, computers were expensive, and her family couldn't afford one. So, she used her uncle's old PC, but he lived with her grandparents. Fortunately, they were only a few blocks away. Her parents didn't mind her gaming so much, because at least she was visiting her grandparents. Her grandparents' house was a fairly large one, as they'd put a roof over 5 kids' heads back in the day. Each child even had their own room. But now only 3 people lived in the house when Jessie visited: her uncle and both her grandparents. The PC was housed in the large living room, and the main hallway led off the room into the bedrooms behind it. Her uncle was quite the introvert and mostly stayed in the room, only popping out to get some coffee, then going back in. It was the same for her grandparents. They spent a lot of time in the kitchen or in their room. So most of the time, it was an empty house. Jessie would play for hours on end on that PC in the living room, late into the night. Sometimes her uncle would stand near her, watching her play, asking questions about the game. But pretty much, she was mostly alone. But it didn't really bother her until one night. Around 8 o'clock, just when it was getting dark, she was playing the PC and the lights were off. She heard a door open and footsteps come from the hallway. Then she felt her uncle standing behind her. Deciding to share what she was doing, Jessie talked about the game, the items her characters had, the dungeons, and the other things she explored in the game. Her uncle didn't say a word. That didn't bother Jessie, so she just went on playing, talking about the game. About 5 minutes later, the lights in the hallway came on, and when Jessie glanced that way, she saw her uncle come out of his room carrying his coffee cup. She was stunned. If he was there, then who was behind her? She slowly turned her head and saw a man, a gray man. His face had no features at all. She jumped up and ran out the door, not even bothering to turn off the PC. She even heard her uncle say something, but she couldn't understand whatever it was because she was really just too scared. When she got home, she told her mom about what had happened. She just laughed it off as an overactive imagination and too many scary computer games. The next morning, during the light of the day, Jessie went back to her grandparents' house and saw her uncle making coffee. He scolded her for leaving the PC on. Then he asked her why she had suddenly ran out of the house. She didn't say anything for a few seconds, then decided to ask him if there just might be a ghost in the house. Her uncle just laughed and said, "Of course not. They're not real. There's no gray ghost in this house." Jessie was really surprised because she didn't tell her uncle the man was gray. So she told him about that. He put down his cup, a bit stunned, then whispered, "That's why I stay in my room. I see it, too."